when I was young, in the early 70s, there was 43 dairy farms, and now there's just one left in the Hope Valley.
Wow.
And that's the big argument that we make all the time about the need for government to recognise food security. And it just shows up the fragility of our just-in-time food system, as it is with a lot of goods these days.
Yeah. So I'm here at Bakewell's Farmers Market talking to Andrew Critchlow, who is the NFU County Advisor for Derbyshire, the National Farmers Union. So Andrew, thank you for agreeing to be interviewed. Now, just want to say up front, you have no political allegiance, you don't have any allegiance to me as an independent or any other party, so you are speaking purely as a farmer in Derbyshire. I know that you're not actually in the Derbyshire Dales as a farmer, but tell us about your farm and what you produce and a bit about your history.
The family have farmed on the farm for several centuries in Edale at Shorewood Farm, and it was a small dairy herd, small dairy farm until 2006. And then for various reasons, and the viability of small dairy farms has been continually getting worse. The total numbers of dairy farmers in the UK halves about every 10 or 12 years, and has done for the last few decades. And in the Hope Valley, when I was young, in the early 70s, there was 43 dairy farms, and now there's just one left in the Hope Valley.
Wow.
So I'm part of the trend where, got out of dairying, and because I then decided to work off farm full time and did various things till I joined the NFU. Then we just, I keep sheep, buying new lambs from here at Bakewell in September, the ewe lamb sale, keep them for a year and sell them on again. So they're 18 months old and they're ready for breeding. Other farmers buy them to breed from them. And then in the winter time, dairy heifers come to me to be looked after on kind of bed and breakfast. And they go back to their home farm when they're near calving or when the grass grows in the springtime. Again, they go back to the home farm.
So tell me, in your view, has farming over the years become more difficult or easier under all of the political regimes?
In terms of viability, it continually gets more difficult. Farms have to get bigger. Most farms are family farms here in Derbyshire. For those to retain their viability, generally, they've got to get bigger in order to do that, or diversify. And a lot of farms have diversified. Here in Derbyshire Dales and the High Peak, then quite a few diversified into tourism. Peach is very popular business numbers, as we see every weekend. That's probably the most common diversification. Another fairly common one is running haulage businesses, carting stone and materials from the many quarries, particularly in the High Peak. That's another probably the second most common one. And then after that, there's a whole variety of things. And the other most common one is working off farm. So that's not diversification, but that's bringing the other income in. It's working off farm, and usually at least one member of the family will be working off farm, either part-time or full-time.
So why do you feel there isn't the support for farmers and the encouragement? Because surely farming is key to our food security and our future.
Absolutely, that's the big argument that we make all the time about the need for government to recognise food security, and the war in Ukraine really brought that to a head and focused that. And I think governments, certainly in Europe, have sort of sat up and thought, yes, we do need to look at farming again, and we've got to look at that food security, because of the food price spike caused principally by the energy spike. A massive impact, and therefore that impacted the price of food on the shelves. And also with climate change and the erratic weather patterns we're now seeing, that's impacting production. And this last 12 months has probably been the most difficult for a lot of farms that they've known for many years. Not so much in Derbyshire in terms of the arable areas, but those that people are arable farming. There's been a lot of farms where they've struggled to get many crops planted at all. So that will then impact the livestock farms, which are principally in Derbyshire, because it affects the price of food and the price and the straw, the availability of straw. It will look very difficult this summer because so many of the cereal crops have not been planted.
Do you deal with supermarkets, and do you feel that they treat farmers fairly?
Very few farms deal direct with supermarkets. The examples of those that most likely be aligned, closely connected with supermarkets and doing the trading directly with them are generally the vegetable growers, salad growers, and some egg producers will be selling direct to supermarkets. Other than that, the vast majority of farmers are then selling their produce on to processors.
Okay.
That is always the big question about the dominance of the supermarkets, but that is reality in terms of that. It's how we get the supermarkets to pay a fair price for that food.
Yeah.
And there's this great conundrum when quite a few people are struggling to put food on the table, is producing food for all price points.
Yeah.
Not everybody can shop at the high-end supermarkets,
Uh-huh.
and it's how food is then affordable, and that's really where public support or government support financially. And I think there's been a thought that as we came out of the EU and therefore the Common Agricultural Policy, that perhaps less support could be given into agriculture. But that would be a great experiment that virtually no other country has tried, to move away from public support, financial support for agriculture, and would be very risky. And kind of moving on to the kind of bigger picture, we're about 60% self-sufficient in the food we could produce in this country. It was at 80% in the 1980s, so it's fallen, considerably, and we mustn't let it fall further. If we look back in history, at the start of the First World War, we're only about 30% self-sufficient in this country, and it was similar again at the start of the Second World War. And that's why, all European governments said never again, when they'd had two wars so close together, being caught twice, dependent on the US in particular, to bring grain and other vital food into the country. Never again must we be caught like that.
Yeah.
And so that's why the CAP was set up.
Okay.
And if we're not careful, if we forget those lessons from history, we could be in big trouble at some time. It could be not too distant future, the way things are looking.
That's right. I mean, they're talking about World War III and Russia and nuclear war, and it's like quite shocking. And that thought of we might be returning to rationing and not having actual food on the shelves. And in fact, we have seen that, haven't we?
Yeah, that's it. And I think we've had some stark reminders.
Have you read Sainsbury's disturbing report about the future of food, in which it is heralding a boom in lab-grown meat substitutes, as well as the introduction of food made from insects? What's your view on that?
I've not read the report, and these are all developments we have to take interest in, and generally one finds that those kind of developments always have a place. But I think for quite some time to come they will be niche. The whole thing about lab-grown meat is, basic kind of physics. You can't get something from nothing in terms of energy and that kind of thing. So there must be inputs going into that to get to that.
Yeah.
And if it's lab-grown, that's buildings. There's all the inbuilt carbon in that, and how all that kind of sits. A cattle or sheep grazing in fields such as the one we stood in with the grass, they're turning something that we can't eat, grass, and turning into very nutrient-dense food. In terms of cattle, meat and milk. And when you look at the carbon footprint of milk, for example, when you work it out on nutrient density, then milk comes out about the top compared to the milk alternatives.
Yeah.
And so you've always got to look at things in the bigger picture. And 60% of this country is only suitable for growing grass.
Okay.
It's not suitable for growing other crops. And so we've got to look at everything in the round, and there's a place for everything. It's all about a balanced diet and a balanced production systems.
Okay. So it's important for us to touch on this net zero agenda. And I've read reports suggesting that cow farts are, I have to laugh, but I mean, it is something that they're saying, that they're partly responsible for climate change, and that humans need to dramatically cut down on meat eating. So what's your view on the net zero agenda, and is that something that has gone out of control and out of balance?
Climate change is something we have to take very seriously as an industry, and we'll have to play our part in reducing our carbon footprints. Food production, humans on the planet have all got an environmental footprint. It's how we produce as efficiently as possible, and we mustn't offshore that carbon footprint to other countries and just think, it's out of sight, out of mind.
Yes.
We've got to look how we do it better here. In terms of ruminants, and methane, which is in the farts.
Yes.
Well, it isn't really farts actually, it's belching as they kind of eat,
Okay.
coming up from the fermenting rumen.
Right.
Methane has as a greenhouse gas, and its kind of potency, yes, it's many times higher than carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide takes thousands of years to break down. Methane, after about 12 years, breaks down. So if your cattle herd and your sheep flocks in the country are staying about the same size, then your net production is not increasing.
Yeah.
So to suddenly cut cattle and sheep numbers is a bit like selling off the family silver. You're only going to get that reduction kind of once.
Yes.
And so, as I said in a previous question, it's all about balanced diets, balanced production, what the country can do best, and we are very good at growing grass. Our maritime climate really suits grass growing.
Yeah, yeah.
And if we can do that more efficiently here than perhaps some more drier countries,
Yes.
then that's what we really need to be focusing on.
Yeah. The thing about carbon dioxide, you said it takes years to break down, but surely isn't that the food of the trees and the grass? I mean, they need the carbon dioxide to give us oxygen.
Yeah, that's the cycle when the CO2 has come from kind of natural sources, hasn't it? Then there is a kind of balance there.
Yes.
With us burning fossil fuels and you're burning
Okay.
things that was millions of years ago were living and come out, that's what's putting the whole
Yeah.
greenhouse gas out of kilter in the world kind of dynamics. And so, we say cattle and sheep are part of that sort of more natural balance,
Okay. Yeah.
whereas fossil fuels aren't. And it's about how we as humans kind of reduce our dependency
Yeah.
on those fossil fuels.
We're hearing reports that farmers in the US right now are being ordered to destroy their chickens en masse due to bird flu. And it seems to me reminiscent a bit of the foot and mouth crisis back in 2001. Do you believe that governments should have the right to create such orders which are obviously devastating to farmers?
In terms of killing out flocks, because you're kind of trying to stamp on the disease, then there's kind of almost no alternative really.
Really?
And practicing good biosecurity. Well, the death rate in the birds anyway is very high.
Yeah.
The mortality is very quick and very high. So it's a case of euthanizing the remaining ones that's living really. So there's kind of no alternatives to that. Thankfully, the numbers have dropped back. The AI came into the country, avian influenza came into the country through migratory birds coming in, and that's how it got into the domestic flocks. It wasn't spread generally from domestic flock to domestic flock because they practice generally very good biosecurity.
Okay.
And free range flocks were even more susceptible than ones that are housed. That was the whole irony with the AI incident.
Okay.
So sadly, it is one of those facts.
So I was reading in the NFU General Election Manifesto report that an astonishing 69% of the UK is farmland. Do you feel that planning laws should be relaxed to allow farmers to utilise part of their land for affordable housing, provided this is done in an environmentally friendly and aesthetically pleasing way?
Yes, I think when it's put like that, then the cost of housing in areas such as the Peak District, which are so popular, because the Peak District is popular both for commuting and for second homes,
Yeah.
then it makes it very difficult for the next generations to buy housing. And I think, yes, it does need to be much easier so there is affordable housing, either to buy or rent or self-build. One's also got to bear in mind, it's a national park and there will always be restrictions on planning, and it's how we strike that balance. So there have been some slight relaxations in the last few years in terms of dwellings. Yeah, so done in the right way, then yes, we would generally support that kind of process.
So, Andrew, if you were Minister for Food and Farming, let's say we got a new department and had free rein, what changes would you make?
First and foremost, to recognise the importance of food security and how that's maximised in this country. We fully accept it's never going to be 100%, even of produce that we can grow ourselves. The other thing is to make it so it's a level playing field with other countries. Virtually every other country has agricultural support, and it isn't just with other countries outside Great Britain, it's within Great Britain, because agricultural policy has devolved, to Scotland and Northern Ireland and Wales, and so it's having a level playing field there because policies are diverging, and so that getting on level playing field makes it more difficult for farmers in England, if they're not getting the same support as they are in, say, in Scotland and Wales in particular. And then it's also about striking a balance between delivering the environment and food production.
Yeah.
Because there's the kind of public kind of discourse seems to be swinging too much to this kind of simplistic approach that land just needs to be given over to nature, as if nature is just going to do that on its own, when a lot of it has been developed along with agriculture, as long as man's been farming.
Yeah.
And it's about getting that balance. And we very much believe in terms of delivering for the environment and delivering for food production as well on the same farms.
Yeah.
You know, it will vary between farms. You know, if there's public support and financial support for delivering environmental measures, then some farms will choose, and their land, it might suit their land better to derive more income from the environmental support.
Yeah.
But there's also got to be encouragement for productive agriculture, otherwise our self-sufficiency will fall.
You mentioned that there was support in Europe for farmers, but I've been seeing reports of farmers like getting in their tractors and driving to like the Dutch farmers, and I think there was what was done in London a few months ago where all these tractors were sort of descending on Parliament Square. So what is all that about?
In Europe, it's a variety of reasons that's done that. A lot of it has been the real red tape that goes with farming now.
Yes.
A heck of a lot of red tape.
Yeah.
Every element is scrutinised, and I think the public just don't realise that. Most farms are what's called farm assured and very rigorous inspections.
Yeah.
And then you've got the inspections that go with the Common Agricultural Policy.
Yes.
And so that can be another wave of kind of inspections. The cost of inputs, the regulation behind the inputs has made them much more costly and more difficult to get hold of. And so, in Europe, just like over here, farms becoming less viable. And so somebody decided to take action.
Yeah.
I think in this country, we're less inclined to take that kind of action. It's not really kind of in the farmers' kind of nature to kind of do that. But the other thing is, we want to keep the public on our side.
Yes.
And I think if we antagonise them,
yeah,
then if we haven't got that public support, which is very high at the moment indeed, independent
Yes.
polls have shown public support for British farmers is very high, and we must hold on to that.
Yeah.
They are our customers, and it's more about the politicians, I think, really appreciating how high esteem the general public generally hold it in, and think the countryside is looks good. And yes, there are environmental issues, and we all, as a society, have to play our part in that. And farmers fully recognise that.
You were saying at the beginning, when you were young and your farm's obviously been in your family for generations, that there weren't all of these rules and regulations. So at some level, surely it must be possible, if there were a sort of visionary and innovative government that really got behind farmers, that a lot of these rules and regulations could potentially be lifted.
You would hope so, yes. It just seems the way of the world in terms of traceability.
Yes.
That's one of the big drivers. And so
is that following horse meat scandal kind of thing?
Yeah, it's those kind of things, and that's what's kind of brought those in terms of that traceability. And prior to that as well, virtually any kind of production system, it seems to be that the buyer, particularly the supermarkets, are trying to cover their backs all the time, so they want in that traceability all the way through. And I think there's elements of that which is good. It's just how far that goes and how kind of nitpicking, and often it's very paper based, rather than looking at the farm and seeing how good a job's been done. And I think a lot of farmers would kind of more accept that, come and look at the farm, see the standards of it's being produced, and that way, rather than doing it all paper-based and just keeping records for the sake of it. If the records have got real valid reasons for having them, then yes.
Yeah.
But lots of them often seem to duplicate, or why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Just often not relevant to family farms. They'd be far more relevant in large businesses or large factories, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay, so if you had a magic wand and could change one thing around farms and farming, what would it be?
To make them, as many as possible, more profitable. It's a bit of a cliche saying, but you can't go green if you're in the red.
I love that.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Cool. Thank you so
It's
much,
all right.
Andrew, for agreeing to be interviewed.
Okay. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you.